I want to start by introducing Sal. He really needs no introduction, particularly for a group that's this passionate about education. But as you all know, InDay is about transformation. And we love to be able to welcome folks who I think are illustrative of true transformation. And Sal is absolutely an example of that within the realm of education, which is something all of us here are so passionate about. So for those that don't know, I've been interested in education reform, and I may have to amend that. I love the title of your TED Talk, which is Reinvention, Reinventing Education, because I think at this point, we need reinvention. I don't think reform is going to get it done, and I may have borrowed that line from Sal. But I've been interested in education, reform, and reinvention really since back graduating high school, and at the time was thinking about the best way to make a difference, and thought about going into teaching, thought about administration, thought about getting involved in public education in some regard, and the other alternative was going into business. And people oftentimes say, well, how can you go into business and make a difference in terms of education? And the belief, the thesis was amass enough influence and resource where I'd ultimately have the chance to do that. And long story short, being in business led to meeting an extraordinary guy named Charles Best, who's the founder and CEO of DonorsChoose.org, which is a philanthropic marketplace for teachers very close to my heart. And being in business brought me to TED this year. And I had the extraordinary privilege to see Sal Khan, the founder of the Khan Academy, give a TED Talk that literally brought the house down. So for all the talks I was in attendance for, and there were some wonderful talks, this talk that Sal gave literally lit the place up. People were vibrating with energy on what was possible, because I think there was a lot of people in the audience that day who know how challenging it's going to be to make a difference in terms of education. For those of you in the audience who have committed some of your time and energy, you know that's the case. And the reason I wanted Sal to be here today was because, to a large extent, and this may be a big statement, I think he may have cracked the code. I think he may have singularly cracked the code on how we can improve education. So long story short, I think you all know by now, but Sal was in the hedge fund business and was asked to help out. It was your cousins?
Cousins,
Your cousins with some math questions they had. So did a YouTube video, and they raved about it, and he'll tell you a little bit more about the feedback he got that was the impetus to do more. And of course, fast forward today, he's got over 2,200 12-minute videos from everything algebra to American history. And it's helping people learn in ways that were really unimaginable before the web came along. And it's gone way beyond that. So there's a back-end system that he and his team have put together that, for lack of a better term, I'd say has created a true adaptive learning platform that's going to scale. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And if he doesn't mention it, one of my favorite Q&A parts of the entire TED conference was an exchange between Bill Gates and Sal. So with that, how about a huge round of applause for Sal Khan? Welcoming him to LinkedIn. And Sal, I'm going to ask him a few questions just to get started, and he'll talk a little bit, but we'd really love for this to be a brainstorming session. I think we've got a lot of incredible talent in the audience. We're going to be recording this, so potentially we can inspire some folks who are going to see this remotely at some point, and maybe they can get involved too. So let's start with the beginning. I know most people here saw the video, but just talk a little bit about how Khan Academy came to be.
Yeah, it was literally, as you mentioned, and I'm sure some of y'all know, I was an analyst at a hedge fund in Boston in 2004, fall of 2004, and my cousin and her family, her two younger brothers and my aunt and uncle came and visited me in Boston right after our wedding. Our wedding was in New Jersey, and then they came up to kind of tour the sites. And actually, while we were touring Boston, it was 4th of July weekend, and I remember while we were waiting for the fireworks to start over the Charles, I would kind of give them like my battery of brain teasers that I use just as kind of a time killer. I'm sure probably y'all use them as interview questions and whatnot. And they're very good. And I remember, like, Nadia who was 12 at the time, was super engaged. You know, most people, when you give them brain teasers like this, my aunt, my uncle, everyone else, are like, what's the answer? Or, but Nadia's like, no, don't tell me the answer. And she would like walk, and these are like hard, you know, CSE logic problems, you know, 100 people who can't see I mean, there's all sorts of crazy things. And I was really impressed. And so the next day we were touring MIT, and in front of the whole family, I said, Nadia, you should think about MIT. I saw you've got some skills. And she kind of didn't pay and her aunt, my aunt, her mother gave my uncle kind of this weird look when I said that. And I was like, I didn't make much of it. And then the next morning, Nusrat Auntie, who's Nadia's mom, told me, that's really nice what you said about Nadia yesterday, but she's actually being tracked into a slower, not even like the regular algebra track. I was like, that's impossible. One, I saw what she did last night or 2 nights ago, and we share a certain amount of DNA. This is. So literally when Nadia woke up, I said, hey Nadia, I don't believe this placement exam. What was the problem? She said it was units. I was like, 2 nights ago you were tackling stuff that's 1,000,000 times harder than units. What do you say when you go back to New Orleans? We get on Yahoo Doodle and speakerphone, and if you're willing to do a little bit of extra work, I'm willing to spend half an hour an evening with you, and she was up for it. So that was kind of the genesis.
So you referred during your TED Talk to what made it so effective, half jokingly that they liked you better in video than they did in real life.
No, non-jokingly.
in all seriousness. Talk a little bit about the magic of what you did and the efficacy and how you built on it from there.
Yeah, well, so it all started, right where I left off. I started tutoring Nadia kind of live, but remotely. Then I started tutoring her brothers, and the whole time I just had kind of a doodle noteboard and speakerphone. So she only heard me, she didn't see me, and we just saw the same thing that each of us were writing. And so fast forward about 2 years, so now we're going into November of 2006. I was having trouble scaling, and the first time you give a lecture on the greatest common divisor, it's kind of fun. The 20th time, it kind of sucks. So I how do I do this? And there's actually a buddy that recommended that I put it up on YouTube. Which I was very dismissive of at first. I was like, it's for dogs on skateboards. It's not for serious mathematics. But when I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea, I decided to give it a shot. And it was interesting because I was like, okay, how do I do this? I don't have a video camera. Should I go get one? I was like, no, because that would cost money. And said, well, with Nadia, we just had the screen going, so there must be some type of software that captures a screen. I didn't even know the word of screen capture software existed. So I did a web search. I found some freeware that did it, and I said, well, I need an art program. I literally used Microsoft Paint for the first 500 videos. And just started doing it. And when I put those first videos up, the first collection of videos, like 20 or 30 videos, my cousins literally did tell me that they preferred me on YouTube than in person. And but I think there's a lot of things, and since then I've heard a lot of feedback. One is just the form factor. This is true of any on-demand video. You can pause, you can repeat, you can review stuff that you might have, or maybe you should have learned last week or last year or a couple of years ago, and you don't have to feel embarrassed. You can do it when you're ready for it. You can go ahead. You don't have to. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But that's true of all on-demand video. And I want to make clear, Khan Academy is not the first on-demand video. I mean, MIT OpenCourseWare started doing this in 2001. I'm sure there's people who did it before that. But I think the feedback I get over and over again from people is that they appreciate how conversational it is. And to some degree, that wasn't by design. It was literally like I didn't care because it was for my cousins. They're not paying me. So I said, let me just make some videos for them. And there's literally an early video where I answer a telemarketer call during the video, and I don't edit it out. Like it's just there. I'm like, I'm not interested in dish networks. Please stop bothering me. And so yeah, exactly. How to say no to obnoxious telemarketers. Yeah, so people enjoy the conversational nature. They like, early on, because these are from my cousins, I didn't have a script. I didn't have a lesson plan even. I mean, some of those early videos, actually, I kind of cringe at them now because I'm like, what should I talk about now? And I just kind of like do it. Let's talk about this. And then, but people really like the idea that, look, I'm expressing exactly what's going on in my brain right now. It's not some thing that's made by some bureaucracy to meet some state standard, and one group of people write a script with some computer graphics, and then another group of people just read the script while the computer graphics happen. So they like the organic nature. A lot of people, once again, that form factor that kind of our brand now. I did it because I didn't want to have a video camera, but people say, look, it actually feels intimate. It actually feels like you and I are sitting next to each other and looking through the concepts together. Or even, this is kind of crazy. I've gotten letters from people who said, not only does it feel like I'm next to you, it feels like you're in my brain. And when they go, like, normally on an everyday basis when they go and think, they think in their own voice. But as soon as they get to like a math test, all of a sudden they say, well, now let's see what the next time they hear me. And so it's, yeah, so, it's a bunch of, and the other thing is I had to be limited to 10 minutes. I guess that was another Khan Academy innovation. But once again, YouTube limited it to 10 minutes. So I had to do it. And that was really good discipline. And now I've gotten tons of feedback, and now I've actually dug up research that shows, people actually can't pay attention in any reasonable way for more than 10 to 18 minutes. And after they do, they zone out for like 5 minutes. And then after zoning out for 5 minutes, they realize they were zoning out. They say, oh my God, let me pay attention. And then they can only zone in for like 9 minutes. And then they zone out for like 9 minutes. And the zoning out gets worse and the zoning in gets worse as you go through a lecture. And the only reason why we have 60-minute lectures is because of logistics. So yeah, all of these things have been kind of an organic process. And I think our trick is to not lose any of that kind of very grounded approach that we started off with.
One of the most revelatory things you mentioned in the TED Talk, I think, is directly akin to this notion of interactivity. But you put some real data behind it, some anecdotes behind it, and that is kids who would otherwise be left behind in school because they're not keeping pace with the class in terms of the fundamental building blocks, when allowed to learn on their own through your tools. Once they got through that fundamental building block, they then got ahead in the next block.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a big deal.
Yeah, and we're seeing it, well, there's a couple of trains of thought there. We first saw it in a summer camp that we tried out the primitive version of Khan Academy with. And literally 6 weeks into the camp, I was just curious, and I literally just did a database query, like who was more than one standard deviation behind, 4 days into the camp, and now is more than one standard deviation above the class average at the end of the camp. And there was this one girl, I won't mention the name for private, but I talked to her later, and literally she just had to get positive and negative numbers, adding and subtracting them, out of the way. And after she did that, she just raced ahead. And then we started looking for it more and more. But there's other things we found. Not only that, which is a big deal. The kid that otherwise would have been tracked as a slow student is now showing that if they just have the chance to really digest the information properly. And if you think about it, that's actually a property of someone who's probably innately gifted, is someone who really wants to digest something properly, not just understand the mechanics. And probably some of those people are being left behind right now. And so it allows them to race ahead. But the other interesting thing, we've seen this in Los Altos, is there are some classically kind of rock star students, the ones that are always straight A, they're really like competitive, and when you force them to start at the beginning from the most basic concepts, even some of them start to stumble at things that they really should have learned in 3rd or 4th grade. And what they've probably done since then is just they've been very good at pretending around their deficiencies or getting around them. And so almost everyone has these gaps. And at that same summer program where that first student was at, I mean, one thing we saw over and over again, there was actually 2 groups. One was that this was 7th graders. In one group, the teacher says, oh, no, this would be silly to make my 7th grader start at 1 + 1 = 2. So we started all of them at like 6th grade math. And then the other group, we're like, yeah, let's just start them off at 1 + 1 = 2. And we saw the group that didn't have the chance to kind of remediate, they just hit a wall at some point. They just couldn't progress or some subset of them couldn't progress at some point. While the group that started at 1 + 1 = 2, it was surprising how many really basic weaknesses some of these 7th graders had, like literally adding 2-digit numbers, knowing how to regroup or carry or things like this. But once they got through that, just as a group, they way outperformed the other group, almost as, even their worst performers were better than the best performers in the other group, which kind of, is the narrative that I think we've been observing, that no matter what you do, you get the best algebra teacher in the room, you have an innately gifted kid, no matter how hard the kid works, if that kid has trouble with 3rd grade math, there's really no way that you can do it in a standard education model.
Speaking of standard education models, talk a little bit about the software platform you guys have been developing, the success you've had in terms of working with Los Altos as a school district, and the impact that the videos plus the software in the classroom is having on classroom dynamics.
Yeah, so the software, I've hinted at it, and if you saw the TED Talk, you kind of know what it is, but it's actually stuff that I started working on before even the first video. A few months into working with Nadia and her brothers, I would point them to random websites. I was like, hey, there's a site that has a couple of cool problems. Why don't you work on those? Or here's another site. And the next morning, I'd have no information on what they did. I didn't kind of believe them that they said they did the problem or how many they got right or wrong. So I started writing this little kind of a JavaScript problem generator for each. And I was really just trying to make sure that they had the core skill down, that they really just understood the core skill. And I put a little database behind it so I could see when did they do the problem, did they use the hints, and whatever else. And then over time, I had a bunch of these modules, and I got tired of assigning, oh, now you're ready for this module. So I said, hey, if you get 10 in a row on this module, it will automatically assign you to the next. And that's where that whole knowledge tree, if you saw the TED Talk, kind of came about. It was originally something for me. It was a tool for myself to understand all the modules I had built and the dependencies. And then I said, well, it would be cool for a student to see it. And once again, my cousins loved that because it was like Legend of Zelda all of a sudden. They could see, hey, I could get over there and all the rest. And you fast forward, the summer camp started using it, and even there we said, hey, every kid can now work at their own pace. The tools, the videos are there, and now the teacher can just intervene when someone's stuck. And then you fast forward to November of 2010, Los Altos School Board literally just met with myself and Shantanu, who's our president, and said, we've heard great things about what you're doing. We want to learn more about it. And what would you do if you had just whatever you wanted to do with a math classroom? And we said we'd have every student work at their own pace. The role of the teacher, they won't have to lecture. They won't have to grade papers. I don't want to say just, but they will walk into a room and they'll get a dashboard. And the dashboard will tell them where every student is working, who's stuck on what. If they want to dive deeper, they can press a couple of clicks and they can see exactly what a student's been working on and really diagnose what's probably wrong with the student. And then use that information to either do a very focused intervention themselves or get some of the students' peers to do an intervention. And what it does is it does a couple of things. One is now everyone can work at their own pace. The teacher's time is fully leveraged. I mean, it's focused, and they're really just narrowing in on exactly what the weak points for the students are. And then the third thing, is probably not obvious from the TED Talk, and if we've had critics, it's in this third area, is that, oh, okay, yeah, Khan Academy, the videos, and that's probably really good for basic skills. And even the videos, it's good for conceptual development. But what about project-based learning? There's this whole school of thought of constructivist learning, and it's always there's these math wars. There's always been like this argument between kind of like like the Tiger Mom school of learning and like the constructivist Seymour Papert learning. Play with Legos enough, and eventually you'll know calculus type of. But it's been like a war, right? And what we're saying is, and when people, the first time they see Khan Academy, they think we are the Tiger Mom version. Because it's like core skills, it's lecture. I mean, we think our lectures, I think the other thing that really differentiates our lectures over others, and this was actually a surprise for me, is I made my lectures geared towards someone like myself when I was 12 years old or 13. Like, I wanted the rationale. I wanted the conceptual development. And I wanted my cousins to have that. I wanted them to be kind of, really innately understand math. I didn't think early on that would be popular. I thought that most students would want the formulas. Most students wouldn't want to think about the intuition. And the surprising thing is, over and over again, we get feedback from the students you wouldn't normally associate with students liking math saying, I'm angry that my teacher did not introduce the intuition. Now it's easy. Mm-hmm. So over and over again, we get that. But what we're, in this kind of debate between what's derisively called the drill and kill and then the constructivists, what we're saying is like, no, it's not an either or proposition now. What's happening in those Los Altos classrooms are so much of the blocking and tackling is being taken off, one, from the class time and from the teacher's shoulders, that the teacher not only can dive in and do very focused and meaningful interventions, but all of this class time is freed up to do these investigations, to do these projects. And I'll challenge any classroom out there to see if they can do more project-based learning and investigations than these Los Altos classes are doing. And I would challenge any classroom out there to see if they can do a more core skills development than these Los Altos classes are doing. And they're doing, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
So one of my favorite parts of your talk that I alluded to earlier was during Q&A with Bill Gates. At one point, everything that Sal talks about sounds so extraordinary. It sounds like vision. How could it possibly be real? How could we get so much good from one guy, a small team, a nonprofit? And at one point, Bill said, so what would it take to scale this to every classroom in the country? How long would that take? And your response was?
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, I'm giving a little asterisk now by the, but no, I mean, it can be adopted tomorrow or now by every classroom, and it's self-service. The dashboard's everything. If the teacher goes, the realistic answer is there has to be some type of deployment, but sure. There's no reason why it doesn't. There's no fundamental barrier for it being used tomorrow by every classroom in the world.
So I think that's a great jumping off point to open it up to the group here. And we just want to do a little brainstorming today. So I was very interested in your thoughts, and I'd love to know how this group of people, how LinkedIn, how some of the folks who ultimately may be viewing this can get involved. What help do you need? How can we start to dramatically increase the footprint?
Yeah.
Just any questions or comments? Yeah, please.
I didn't grow up here, and I just saw your TED Talk a few days ago, and after that I also saw the TED Talk that Ken Robinson gave about schools killing creativity.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that, and how has it influenced what Khan Academy is doing and what it's planning to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the Ken Robinson talk's awesome, and some people view our talks as very aligned, and it's kind of some people have viewed it that somehow they're not aligned. And my point is kind of going back to that what's going on in those South Coast classrooms is that right now so much time is focused on kind of the mandated curriculum from the state, and so much time is focused on kind of making sure that the worst don't do bad, there's no time for real creative work. In fact, I'd say even 95% of people in classes right now that claim to do project-based learning or claim to do creative things in the classroom, it's not creative. It's cookbook. And they do. It looks good when someone, we're studying, how we can send a satellite to the moon or something. But they're not. They're just, it's some type of cookbook thing with words in the right way. What we think, and what I hope Khan Academy enables, and we'd like to pilot this in more and more schools, is it can enable a whole set of really fundamentally creative things. And some of that will probably be on our platform. Actually, Jonathan, who actually used to be a LinkedIn employee, and I used to, for 2 summers, we did a summer camp where we kind of view this as our R&D for what is the future of real learning. So you have this Khan Academy, the videos, you can get a lot there. But if you really wanted people to learn stuff, and we did stuff with kids, and this is stuff we might even internalize into the software, where, I mean, it was pretty fun. I mean, it was all the games I wanted to play with my friends at my birthday party, but no one else wanted to. And so we would have 6 kids playing Risk, and we would have the other 24 kids, they would each get a colored piece of cardboard that says, if you're holding red at 3 o'clock, which is 3 hours from when we started, that colored piece of cardboard would be worth the number of armies that Red Army has at 3 o'clock. And same thing for yellow and green and so on. And we gave them like $500 in Monopoly money each. So they all started with one of these. And then we started the Risk, and then we told the rest of the 24, trade the actual things. And it was fascinating. We saw like 5th graders start making models. There was one 5th grader who started doing naked shorting without knowing what naked, I mean, he would literally promise he would sell something to someone and say, wait, but I'll get you the actual security later.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the financial derivative world, that had nothing to do with the clothing that student was wearing.
Yes, there was a little bit of that too. Wow. No. No, we would get, the summer camp would be shut down if that was happening. And it was fascinating. One kid came up to me and he said how, he figured out that right after someone's turn in Risk, their security went up because we've all played Risk. It looks like that person's about to take over the world, but Risk has these huge swings, and so he would always. So he didn't even look at the board. He just shorted whoever's turn it was, and he ended up winning the whole game because he just took it. And so you had this, and then we played another time where it was more of a determinant, where we played a variation called Paranoia Risk, where there's only one winner. As soon as everyone's trying to eliminate one person from the board, as soon as that one person is eliminated from the board, the person who's trying to eliminate them wins. And so now we said, whoever, if you're holding the color of the winner, that's worth 100, and everyone else is worth 0. And so now it's a pure probability. That security should trade, if it's trading at $65, that's saying you're saying there's a 65% chance. I didn't tell them this ahead of time. But it was amazing how many times the security started selling for 150 or 200. There was serious bubble mentality going on. And then but anyway, I'm going on. I could talk for hours about this. And we played Settlers of Catan one time with separate board games. Then the second time around, we let them trade across countries. And we say, hey, how come we actually had like a pariah state that couldn't trade, and we compared the development to the ones that trade. Well, anyway, you get the general idea. There's a lot of stuff that can be done if class time is freed up that's really deep, that gives people understanding. I mean, in one round of the risk, I was the market maker, and these students tried to finally understand what a bid ask, what a market maker is, what is a secondary market versus a primary, all of this stuff. I mean, it might be relevant to you guys very soon, I don't know. Yeah, so my vision, to answer your question, my vision is more of that without giving up the stuff that kids need to really prove to the world on the SATs, the AP tests, that they know those core skills as well.
Sometimes people ask the question, what happens if some of our best and brightest, rather than go into the financial world and hedge fund trading, they were to go into areas like education? You know, that's part of what happens. You get this kind of brilliance applied in the right ways.
There could be a good sequel to that, where there's a guy who's, well, I won't name any names, but he's a quant at a very prominent hedge fund, and he went, well, pretty much he left that fund, and I think he's being paid not to work in the industry now because he knows too much. And so, yeah, he might be our analytics guy if things work out. But yeah, so.
Christine?
Hi. So one of my all-time favorite books is Neil Stephenson's The Diamond Age. And in it, he's got the young ladies illustrated primer, and this rich guy builds this book so his granddaughter can have this tremendous education. And one of the aspects of it is that all the content and the learning materials are in there, but there are these ractors who are people who are tracking and watching as they move through the book. They actually have a dashboard with metrics in the book. And I'm thinking about our social network and your materials, whether it's ebooks or videos, and wondering if we could create like ractors who would be indexed to either the videos or the materials, and they would be people who were certified and volunteered, so that the kid at any point where they're stumbling could maybe hit a button, get an IM, start to engage with that community to get that kind of personalized stuff worldwide. Yeah, no, that's exactly, we have to figure out the details of how we implement that, but that's kind of our next level. Because the first level is videos, the second level are kind of these exercises and dashboard. The next level is the community. We're pushing 2 million unique users a month, and that's enough. That's a critical mass that's growing. And so there's a couple of things. One is just the model of volunteerism, peer-to-peer. Hey, I'm at my desk. I have an hour free. I would like to tutor someone. We could facilitate that. And you'll have the same data as a teacher, and we could pair up people appropriately based on what they know and what they don't know, and get the kids tutoring. So it's either that model, or we're thinking of having some kind of a perpetual office hours. So volunteers can say, hey, I'll be free at this time. I'm in Malaysia, and I'll be free from 2 to 3 p.m., and I know these set of topics. And so if we get a critical mass, and you actually don't need that many people, but if you get enough people, you could have exactly what you said. As soon as you're stuck, it's not even something that has to be scheduled. As soon as you're stuck, you say, I need help, and it immediately points you. So I'm actually on, I'm on page 85 of Diamond Age right now. So I haven't gotten to the Ractor part. But, oh, is it? Yeah, but we're clearly reading the same books. But yes, that's where we actually, it's funny, each layer we kind of think that's actually going to be the big play, not what we've already done.
So would love to throw it out there as a Hack Day challenge. For those of you in the room or watching, it would be pretty cool to do something very similar, and I had a similar idea based on originally hearing you speak. With 100 million members, professionals with the right kind of skills and backgrounds, one of the things that was most exciting to me was that anyone can come online to lend a hand and help mentor and answer questions. So I think it would be a very cool hack to figure out a way to do exactly what Christina was just suggesting. Click a button, and we could pair up the right kids with the right mentors from among our professional membership. The other idea that's probably a little more in-depth than a hack is to start to leverage everything you've done for the kids for vocational training. Yeah. Because one of the things that I think we all hear increasingly is that it's not that there's not jobs available at times or in certain geographies. There are jobs available. It's just that people don't have the skills to take advantage of them. Yeah. Yeah. So if we could somehow reskin some of the back end and add vocational training modules, and then again, partner up the people that need to learn with the professional membership, we could really do some good. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And no, I think there's, especially with the, it's a way to kind of donate your time. There could even be some badging that transcends, what y'all are doing and what we're doing. I mean, it becomes part of like, hey, I'm a proud volunteer, or even your badges. Hey, I know. I mean, it's funny because we've thought about doing Facebook integration. It's on our pipeline. And even before we've done it, we have students who are copying and pasting their badges they get on Khan Academy and like kind of, bootstrapping the integration for us. They're so proud of it. Yeah. So yeah, something like that. And like the volunteer badge could be a pretty powerful kind of mark of whatever.
Yeah. So call to action for anyone interested in the next hack.
And also developing modules. Developing modules is actually a very easy thing to contribute if anyone's interested. If you're like, hey, I have an expertise in probability and it doesn't look like there's a module that really kind of teaches and quizzes that aspect. That's, we actually do that as part of our interview process for our developers. And it takes them, if it takes them more than a day, we're like, well, we're not hiring that.
What's the best way for folks watching who would like to contribute a module? What's the best way for them to do that?
Right now, it's you can actually go. You can there's on our page it says contribute, and there's a way you can go to our kind of our software wiki, and you can kind of how do you check out the code? How do you see where all the There's even specs out there for unbuilt modules if you don't have an idea of what to build, and then they're all in JavaScript. They're pretty straightforward. The kind of the thinking about the learning is harder than probably the programming.
Okay. Nick?
Thanks for being here, first of all. My question is, I've got 2 kids, and what I've learned in my experience with them is they have completely different ways of learning.
Yeah.
Specifically, my son has dyslexia, so for him, he's had to put a lot of energy into, doing well in school and so on. I wonder how the program, accommodates kids who have kind of, learning challenges, disabilities, and so on.
Well, and this is, again, another surprising thing that it wasn't by design. When I started, I viewed it as for my cousins. It maybe catered to someone like myself, or probably a lot of y'all when y'all were 12 or 13 years old. But some of the biggest feedback we get are from parents and students with learning disabilities. Dyslexia, people ADHD, actually some parents of autistic students have loved it. And what it is it's dyslexia probably the main, well, one is the videos are very, it's not just, and I've been told this by dyslexics, that just the fact that I'm writing it out, it's not just printed text that just pops up, is a big deal. The fact that I'm talking while I'm doing it, it kind of helps integrate everything, and that's the same thing for people with ADHD. The fact that I'm using these different colors for the different concepts. And I think the biggest thing, and once again this goes to the form factor, is that it's self-paced. I mean, I think a lot of, a dyslexic student, they're stressed, and as soon as you're stressed, you can't learn. I mean, that's the thing that there's the stress. If it's taking you half a second longer to process something, but you have this kind of assembly line, like move along at the same pace, that's going to leave your son behind. And now there's none of that stress. He can take as much time as he needs to digest the concept. Yeah, I think it's weird. I mean, I don't want to seem like this is a cure-all for everyone, but we didn't design it, but the gifted students love it. The students who are falling behind love it. The adult learners. So it is one of those things. If you just give people a chance to learn, you don't talk down to them. You respect their intelligence. You don't just teach them formulas and they can and you give them instant feedback. It's amazing. It kind of works for everybody.
Great, thank you.
So at root in all of this is a product that has proven to be incredibly effective. And you mentioned earlier YouTube originally had limitations on the duration of the video, and that certainly contributed to the form factor. But I'm assuming over time there's been a lot of iteration.
Yeah.
From a product development perspective, could you shed a little light on the approach that you've taken? Because you're doing something very right, obviously, and I think.
Oh yeah.
helpful
No,
for
I mean
people
I've learned now that there are words to describe our process, lean and agile and all of this kind of stuff. But it is literally just put stuff out there and see what happens. There's that. That's the kind of the process, and I think in terms of the actual thing that goes out there. I mean, it's amazing how much money and resources have been wasted on trying to make educational materials that look polished, that look like this, and as soon as you watch them, you disengage. And I think it's this focus on the end user and nothing else, and not trying to pretend, when I started and now as an organization, we never want to fake that we're good quality, right? And probably, and so a lot of these attempts to really polish up things are to fake that it's good quality, because to the maybe the buyer who's not the user, the buyer might superficially look at something and say, oh, there's computer graphics, that must be good quality. But I think the big takeaway from the Khan Academy is something that's really going to take on. It really just has to purely cater to the user. And even if it is scrappy and not the most professional thing, it'll still resonate. And in terms of the process, I'm now getting approached by a lot of, I want other people other than myself to teach. And I've been approached by some medical schools and others, and we want to do something like this in our program. And I've sat through some of those meetings, and they go on, you know, and oh, we have to talk to this department. So now my policy is when anyone, and you know, wants to say, hey, we think we have some people who might be able to make videos and we want to use them, I say no preliminary meetings. Just come to my office. I'll go take a walk and make the videos. I'll show you how to do it, and I just want them to start making videos. And they're like, wait, we haven't planned. I was like, no, they teach these classes. Just tell them to come, make a 10-minute video, and then we'll talk about whether, you know, how we can improve them. And you know, it kind of scares these people, the fact that they might actually produce something. But yeah, I think that's the take. You know, and even in our organization, we're kind of, since we're such a small organization, we're like 6 people going on 8 or 7 people now. We're very bandwidth constrained, and so now we're trying to, like, you know, I tell Shantanu, who's our president, if me and him are in the same meeting at the same time, there's something wrong with our process. We force people to go on walks for meetings so that it's a fixed. I mean, I don't want to, you know.
By all means,
change
that's one of the reasons
how
you're here.
Okay, yeah, we do that. I mean, a lot of the,
list.
yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like an important meeting. I say I'm going to go to El Camino and back. If it's kind of a shady meeting, I'm going to the train stop and back. Well,
So that if it doesn't
I'm just
go
giving
well,
you the
they have
secret
an
sauce.
exit.
Hopefully, none of y'all want to meet. It's like, oh, let's just go to the Caltrain station. And, you kind of know where you fit in the hierarchy then. How long of a walk? No, but the other thing is we actually want to eat our own dog food, which is, look, the reason why we're able to scale, why such a small organization is able to, you know, on some level educate 2 million kids and maybe 200 million kids eventually or whatever, is that we're using these technologies. So even, you know, even our board meetings, you know, right now our board meetings, we spend 3 hours just giving an update. I'm like, this is silly. Like, I'm just going to make YouTube videos explaining what we've been up to the last week. You know, I have the screen, huh? It's a roadshow, and and our board can pause and repeat it. And now, like, we're exactly, you know, and we're thinking of making this a practice across the organization, where we're going to get everyone Camtasia, and everyone at the end of the week, instead of, like, you know, writing me an email or Sean, like, let's just say, hey, this is what I've been up to. They have their computer right there. This is what I'm working on, and just archive it. And that way, when we go into meetings, we're all on the same page. We know what everyone's been up to. If someone says something that's unfamiliar, I don't have to pause the meeting. I can go back and see what they're up to and actually get a much better. And I've told a bunch of people this. I have a buddy who was working at another startup, and I told this idea, and he bought into it. And he told their CEO, he's like, because she wanted him to write a white paper about what he's up to. And he's like, oh, well, how about I do a screencast? Because now, you know, you can pause and repeat it. It'll be me explaining it as a human being, and I can show you. And it was funny. They had a lot of, they're like, no, that's silly. It needs to be a white paper. But it begs, no, it doesn't. It should really just be, I mean, it takes 10 minutes to make a 10-minute video, especially if it's for just like internal consumption, as opposed to a day to write a white paper that no one's going to read. And so, yeah, that's what we're up to.
I was just reminded of the effectiveness of the RSA animations,
Yeah,
which is very similar in terms of mapping out and graphically
Yeah,
demonstrating with
yeah,
the
yeah.
voiceover. And you hear folks, you know, a lot of people in the audience today, I'm sure, they'll rave about them. They'll
Yes.
say, have you seen this on motivation? Have you
Yeah,
seen, you know?
yeah.
Go ahead, Kat.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Sal, thanks for being here.
Oh.
A few weeks ago, we watched Waiting for Superman
Yeah.
here at LinkedIn, and it was incredibly moving.
depressing.
Yeah, yeah, very depressing. And I learned about the Khan Academy after watching that movie here at LinkedIn. And so after spending time on your site, it was pretty obvious to me that what you have developed can be the superhero solution for schools that don't have resources, for kids that don't have resources to help them learn. And so I'm just wondering if part of the Khan Academy's charter is to get those kinds of resources into the hands of kids where, you know, they don't have computers at home, or the school systems don't have computers. Is that part of the conversation? And if
Yeah,
not,
no,
how can we help?
absolutely. So, I mean, there's a couple of things here. You know, one of the things, and this is something that we're very protective of as an organization, is the reason why I think we're resonating where a lot of other attempts, governmental attempts, NGO attempts, for-profit attempts, have all failed, is that everyone else is trying to kind of reform the beast. You know, they're trying to go in there and chisel at it and, you know, lobby this or that and all the rest. And the reason why I think we've worked is we've ignored the beast. We've just kind of done our own thing and go straight to the student. But at the same time, this Los Altos thing, which kind of fell in our lap, proves that, no, this can help the beast. I shouldn't call it the beast anymore. But so you know, what we're doing is, and this wasn't our plan even a month ago, but especially the TED Talk kind of took this to the next level. We are building kind of a rollout SWAT team. And what we're going to do over the next 6 months, because the other thing we want to be careful about is not rolling out too fast and ruining, we're kind of like, the Trader Joe's model. We want the community to really want us, and we're like, okay, well, you got to give us the right space, and it's all. We want the SWAT team over the next 6 to 18 months. We're being reached out now by about 10 schools or school districts a day who want to do this. And so we want to pick the 10 or 15 that are the most likely to be a success. And they don't have to all be affluent. I mean, actually, hopefully they won't mainly be affluent school districts like Los Altos. We're looking for underserved communities, some charter schools, some independent schools, some regular middle-class private schools, all of the above, some fancy private schools. And we're actually going district-wide in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in Los Altos as well. So if you have a 4th or 5th or 6th grader in Los Altos, you'll start hearing me in your house, whether you like it or not. So we want to do that. And once we have that and we learn more and we can kind of productize it, then we're going to explore how it can become a more massive rollout. And the narrative throughout this is we're also going to make it more and more self-service. I mean, like that first question you had asked, it can be used in any school district tomorrow. And to some degree, that's another volunteer opportunity. If your school district isn't doing it and you think they should, you guys can become the ambassadors for it. And you guys all have the same, if you guys go to our website, it'll be pretty obvious how you could implement this in a classroom. And so you could be that person that goes to the school district and say, look, we can do this. We can go, the Los Altos people are awesome about other people coming in and observing the classrooms. So if it's local, you'll say, hey, why don't we go meet with those Los Altos people, observe their classroom, and then we'll implement it here, and you guys can shepherd it, make sure their firewall is set up, whatever. So it happens. And I think that by itself could be a pretty, actually that might be the most powerful way to volunteer.
Sal, how do teachers respond to it? Do they feel like it's an incredible tool that helps take their classrooms to the next level? At times, do they feel threatened by it? What kind of response do you get?
Yeah, I mean, we get like a positive selection bias. For the ones that reach out to us are the ones that are probably using us on some level. And those teachers are excited, more excited than I even thought originally that they would. Because I think the really skilled teachers, the reason why they went into teaching is they wanted to form bonds with students. They wanted to be creative themselves and test the children's creativity. But then when they go into a classroom, there's 30 kids, all different levels. They have to do all of this, classroom management, be quiet. And actually, that's almost more of the, if I had to become a teacher tomorrow in a real classroom, that's the stuff I would have to learn. Because I don't know, I actually did volunteer once in college, and literally within 10 minutes, all of the kids were standing on top of the table. And I had no idea what I did wrong. Like, it was like this. But the teachers want to be this liberated person who can form bonds, who can dig in, who have the data. And so the teachers who kind of see that, they've loved it. These Los Altos teachers love it. I spoke to all of the Los Altos elementary school teachers, and they're pretty much, I mean, as far as I could tell, it seems like they're on board. I think the resistance comes from, it comes from people who aren't familiar with what we're trying to do, and they just see the headline, or they just see they just get a glimpse of kind of what it's about. So unfortunately, there have been headlines like, will Khan Academy, is this the solution to our education problem? I mean, maybe we think it is on some level, but when people react, they have a knee-jerk reaction to kind of this panacea type thing, and they're like, oh no, this isn't it, and this is going to be just drill and kill learning, and they'll say all of that type of thing. There's obviously a lot of people on, we try to stay out of political debates, but there's a lot of people who view Khan Academy as an empowering tool against things like teachers unions, or against things like, or to empower. So when maybe someone in a teachers union sees someone else say, oh, now that Khan Academy's here, this is going to get you guys, they immediately react against it. We try not to enter those debates, but what I will say is that, no, we're empowering the teachers. It's going to free up their time. Right now, and this is why teachers are, I think, so frustrated, is every time there's a new study that comes out that shows that schools are falling behind, and we're falling behind Senegal or whatever, some other country, the reaction of policymakers is we have to micromanage more. We have to go in there, and the belief is that, and the micromanagement is all around the focus of de-risking the worst teachers, de-risking the worst students on some level. And what it does is it completely straps everyone else. And what we're doing is now we're liberating everyone. You can cater to everyone, and to some degree you are de-risking the teacher who might not have. And I'm not saying this is most teachers, but in any industry there's a bell curve, and there's the bottom 5% of teachers, and 5% of kids are in front of the bottom 5% of teachers. And you can de-risk them because now they have an alternative. And now the top 95% or the top 50% or the top 5% of teachers are liberated to fully express their kind of abilities, their creativity. They could think of stuff like my trading game or even better stuff. And so I would say on the whole, the ones that have watched the TED Talks, the ones that have understood what we're trying to do are pretty excited. The one other dimension is, and this is happening in Los Altos classroom, I mean, there's fifth graders doing the chain rule in a Los Altos classroom. And so as a teacher, that can be a little daunting. You're a fifth grade teacher. You signed up to be a fifth grade teacher, and there's a kid doing calculus in the room. But what we saw from the one teacher, when we observed it, she literally, and he was marked by the dashboard as red. Like, he wasn't understanding the chain rule. So she's like, I better intervene. But what was really powerful is that she went and she said, you know what? I haven't seen this since college, and I kind of forgot how to do this or what this was all about. Why don't we learn it together? And we actually, I was there observing. The kid, it immediately clicked with the kid. Like, it almost felt like he respected the teacher 10 times more because she was willing to let down her guard as the source of all correct answers in the world. Right. Yeah, so a teacher has to feel comfortable. Actually, on the same line, there was a reporter was doing a story and they visited one of the fifth grade classrooms, and there was one girl in there was doing trigonometry, and the reporter sits down next to her and says, so do you think this is fifth grade math? And the girl goes, no, I think it's sixth grade.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for being here. So I watched your TED Talk twice.
Oh.
Once I discovered it on LinkedIn today, by the way, and it was like 11 p.m., something like that. I watched it. I was completely blown away. I called my wife. I need to show you something. So we watched it together the second time. And it made me deeply depressed. And I love your system.
Yeah, no,
I really
He's
love
just
your
building up.
system.
He's building into it, yeah.
So the problem here is that, you have two aspects in the system, right? One is you learn at your pace.
Yeah.
The second one, you exercise collaboratively in the room with other kids.
Yeah.
So it needs to be implemented in the school system in some way. You can't do that without implementing in the school system.
Yeah.
School systems are slow.
Yeah.
My kid is 4.5 years old. I want her to do that in 2 years.
Yes.
I don't live in Los Altos.
Yeah. Neither do I. So this is, yeah, I have another interesting story to tell you. I don't live in Los Altos either, but yeah, I'll say I have another interesting tidbit.
And I was growing up in the third world.
Yeah.
And I made it here to the Silicon Valley, which I think is quite an achievement for myself.
Yeah.
And now I kind of feel as if I'm back to the third world because my kid will not be that genius. You will create, a few million genius kids and a couple of billions who are as dumb as they are right now. Well, sorry.
Underserved.
Including my own.
Yeah. What school district
how
are y'all in?
how can we scale it fast?
Yeah.
I have 2 years.
You have 2 years. Yeah. No, you're. So I'm actually very close to you because I actually live about 100 feet from the Los Altos district border. I live in Mountain View near Cuesta Park, and the same house costs $300,000 more, literally 200 feet away, because of this discrepancy in the school system.
Exactly.
And one of these fifth graders actually goaded me on when I heard the story. Is that so on that same news piece? So these kids were doing they call it a rocket run, where the teacher sets up this thing where they measure how fast they can do something. So they usually do a very simple exercise. So they took all this footage when they went to the classroom, and some of these kids are doing trigonometry and all sorts of crazy stuff. But the footage they showed on NBC Nightly News was these kids doing arithmetic, right? And when I talked to the teacher, they're like, oh, they love the news piece, but they really didn't like the fact that the footage showed them doing arithmetic. And then, but in the news piece, they said, they mistakenly said that this was a pilot in Mountain View. And so one of the kids said, well, at least they think we're in Mountain View. Which I had the same kind of reaction. I was like, no, Mountain View must come back. And the simple answer is we're trying to go as fast. It seems like this will work, is if we can do enough like powerful use cases. And you know, the Bay Area is going to be disproportionately where most of these use cases are. I mean, already I've been told by Los Altos people, Palo Alto Unified, I mean, none of these are cheap areas either, but all of them have started to tour them, and they seem interested. But if you can do these really powerful use cases around, and probably the scariest thing is when people all over the country, like you, see that there are kids in these 10 or 15 schools of all different, not just affluent neighborhoods, maybe some of them are but across the board, they're learning at their own pace, they're engaged in mathematics, the classroom is fun, and they're doing trigonometry or whatever, you're going to get scared. And you're going to really rock the boat in your local school district. And you and the other parents. I mean, I think the PTA is probably the biggest that's the strongest influence. And so we're hoping that I mean, hopefully we can address your school district. Maybe it'll be one of the 15. But I think to go massive change, I think that's what's going to be. It's going to be parents having that visceral reaction that you just had, because I think that's the best way to kind of disrupt. And I have a 2-year-old, so I have about 3 years to get Mountain View up to speed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Sal, oftentimes when people think about hacking and ways in which they can get involved, I'm sure they're thinking about the code, the product. You were talking about modules earlier, but I think this parent-led advocacy and kind of demand-driven approach is going to be important to accelerate things. So one of the things we may want to start thinking about is how we create a little bit of an I want my MTV strategy or energy, where we make it incredibly simple for parents to come together to start requesting it within their communities.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Actually, that'd be super powerful. Yeah. Yeah, an online campaign.
So maybe some folks can get together afterwards and we can do some brainstorming on that. Michael.
Hey, Sal, thanks a lot for coming in. So in spirit of brainstorming, just wanted to throw out a possibility of LinkedIn skills. Seems like a really natural connection in here with Khan Academy, because we have people on our site who have skills, and they're highlighting the skills, and they're over time, they're maybe available to help. And you may be going and looking at skills, wanting to learn them, and that could be a good jumping off point to Khan Academy. And the flip side, coming back from Khan Academy over to LinkedIn. So that just seemed like a really natural.
Yeah, actually, that would be cool. And I'll take another level to that, because the one thing that we've been experimenting with is how do we increase the teaching base beyond me?
Right.
And it's not a rate limiting factor for us where we are right now, but it would be huge if everyone taught everything that they know. And so if you had a skill, I mean, it's funny, the first hedge fund I worked for, the portfolio manager retired, but then the second hedge fund I worked for, they were so impressed by my videos on finance that I almost didn't have to interview. That they were like, wow, this guy clearly knows his finance. And so there could be something very interesting with LinkedIn. I mean, we could work out the details where you teach what you know. And one, that obviously has social good to it, but it's huge marketing for yourself, just because a lot of people will watch what you know. And if any employer says, well, does he know what well, hey, clearly he's teaching the subject.
Right. Your video count.
Your video count,
8,000 people have watched this.
Exactly, especially if other people endorse it and there's some type of curation going on. That would be powerful. I mean, we've been thinking, there's TED and then there's TEDx. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the difference. TEDx is kind of the franchise. You could start a TEDx shoreline, and as long as it meets their standards, you do a conference, and then you record all the videos, and then TED will look at some of those videos, and the good ones they'll put in on TED.com. And so we've been thinking about doing something like that with Khan Academy. We've jokingly called it X-Con. But it was, and so this could be an interesting. I'm just brainstorming out loud.
Absolutely.
Something like this, it gels with LinkedIn's knowing what showing what you know, your network being able to appreciate that, and at the same time helping to potentially build a very powerful library of really useful stuff. I mean, and a lot of it could be just, very hands-on, hey, I'm the office manager. This is how I think about ordering this. I mean, very basic stuff, or it could be very sophisticated stuff.
Well, nobody knows anybody else's job very well.
Exactly.
So just
and actually, that's a
showcasing what
huge
you do.
corporate kind of knowledge management difficulty. And this would be, right now in a lot of corporations, the ability to rise up is based on how well you can, market yourself. But now all of a sudden, if you're like, wow, now I understand what that person does, and wow, it's brilliant, and that person, there's all sorts of positive things that could be from that. But yeah, that was all, yeah.
Thanks.
So what if we just created a tell us what you know piece of text on the skills page? So it's not a status update 140 characters or less. It's 10, 12, however long the duration would be, minutes. and we could give people a little space on their profile to upload the video, and use skills as a jumping off point. So it's essentially highly targeted marketing for the right people, the right expertise. We could also leverage skills. Obviously, the module in the middle of that page is showing some of the most influential people within that skill community. We may want to think about sending a mail to some of those folks. And it's all in for good. So we could say, how would you like to get involved with being the first to tell us what you know, and participate in some kind of collaboration between the Khan Academy and LinkedIn?
Yeah, no, that's something that would be awesome.
It's a great idea, Mike. Okay.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for coming. So I know your focus is primary education, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about, our university system here.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of talk recently about kind of like a bubble in higher education.
Yeah, Peter Thiel and
exactly. College costs are ballooning. As a society, we're placing more and more just emphasis on credentials.
Yes.
Ivy League is the big thing. Everybody wants their kids to go to the Ivy League. Do you have any thoughts about reforming that kind of system? Well, not reform, because I know
Reinventing
yes. That system specifically, and maybe if there's anything we need to change our way of thinking as a culture, so that we can get back on track.
Yeah. So, and to give you all background, so so Peter Thiel, one of the founders of PayPal, he runs Clarion Capital, another hedge fund guy. He's been pretty vocal about this bubble in higher education. He kind of, he's been good at spotting the previous bubble, the housing bubble, the tech bubble, and all of that. It's a bubble because people are willing to pay ridiculous amounts of money in perception that it's a good investment when it really isn't, which is what a bubble is, right? And that's true of the housing bubble. That was true of the tech bubble. And so his kind of beyond just talking about it, his attempt at kind of disrupting it, which I think is in the right direction, but I don't think it goes quite enough, is he started this program where he's targeting the same kids who would otherwise go to Stanford or MIT or Harvard or whatever, and say, look, I'll pay you $100,000 if you drop out of school and come start a business. And he's trying to make it so there's something very very desirable, like a very prestigious to have, and probably will help your career, that doesn't cost money, that you would give up that other thing. You would give up the college degree, and this might become more desirable. I think what would really work, I mean, to take his thing to the natural, I've thrown it out as a kind of a crazy idea like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and now it's getting a little less crazy, is I think it would be awesome to start a university, for lack of a better word, in, say, Mountain View. And this first university, and I don't want to make it sound elitist, but it would focus on the best and the brightest. It would focus on the same kids who are applying to Stanford and MIT and Harvard and all of this right now. And I'll take a tangent on why I say that, is because I think that's the only way you can disrupt. Because if you can, so the goal here is, instead of these students paying $50,000 a year and going into debt, they would be paid. And the reason why I say that is if you can make the best education have negative tuition, then I'll make a geeky calculus analogy by the squeeze theorem. You literally, how can anyone else justify charging anything, right? If the best education is negative tuition, and so you get people to come in, and their curriculum is literally 6 months at LinkedIn, 6 months at Google. They work in software engineering, they work in product management, they work in marketing, they work in PR, they work in accounting, 6 months at Apple, 6 months working for a VC firm, 6 months developing iPad apps or whatever. And they are paid. Some of the money goes to the students, maybe $30,000 a year, and then some of it goes to the university to set up the environment that you should have. So it's not this purely commercial thing. So you have all of the things that we all liked about college. You have a campus. You have pretty trees to read books under. You have venues to meet your future husband or wife. And you have a scaffold of truly academic material that you can do at your own pace, something like the Khan Academy. And the faculty, and you have seminars. Hey, I'm working on a project at LinkedIn, but you know what? This is going to require some signal processing. I don't know signal processing. I go back to the campus. There are either other students there's Khan Academy resources, or there are mentors in the Valley who are willing to work with me on signal processing. And then I learn it. And you go through this, so what's going to happen is these students are going to end up finishing, not with debt, they're going to have money saved. They're going to be way more desirable by this whole slew of companies. And they kind of have the downside protection because they still had a little bit of an academic scaffold. They'll do well in the MCAT, the GRE. If they decide they want to become a doctor or a lawyer, they can still do that. And I think if you do that, it'll be pretty hard for Stanford to justify charging you know. And the other thing is we could go right out the gate, because if you get the employers involved, especially these kind of marquee employers, and maybe even the Khan Academy, because we have a brand and it's in the right place, you don't face that difficulty of starting a university that no one's ever heard of. People will hear of this university on day one.
Right.
And so I think something like that, and if that's successful, then all of a sudden the tuition inflation, it becomes very hard to justify. And then you can start more and more of these around the country at different levels, different specializations.
So I know, I think like Olin University in Boston, I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Tried to do something similar to that. It was like free engineering college. Most of their professors were from MIT, and they kind of did like the project exploration.
Yes.
But I know some people had good results going there. I don't know if you've looked
I
at
think
that.
the problem with, and actually I know Olin pretty well. My advisor at MIT actually ended up becoming a professor at Olin. I think the problem is the reason why people are paying $200,000 right now is to have a signal to send to the job market that I kick butt. And even though Olin, I haven't gone to Olin, but I can imagine it's probably a very good education. That's not why people are spending $200,000. People are spending this, they want that signal. I went to MIT. I went to Caltech. It's the brand. And so Olin has a problem with that, and it also has the problem with the connections. I don't know if Google, maybe Google does, but I don't know if Goldman Sachs recruits at Olin, even though maybe they should, because they don't have they don't know what Olin is. And so I think the key thing would have to have some type of partnership with very marquee recruiters. Because if you get an ecosystem of 10 of the top tier, the companies everyone wants to work for, the other companies, the next tier of companies are going to say, wait, if Google's getting or LinkedIn's getting all of its talent there, we better get our talent there too. We don't want to look like we're getting the scraps from So I think it's very important to build a whole ecosystem there. And actually the big difference would be that the projects would be stuff that actually matters, like actual. And in the past, if I would have recommended this 50 years ago, people would have said, oh my God, but you're making people do vocational things inside. That's horrible. It's commercial. But the reality is the stuff that's going on in LinkedIn right now, the analytics, the software engineering, the marketing, the stuff that's going on in Google, it's more intellectual than the software engineering projects that we worked on when we were undergrads. It's more intellectual than almost anything, than the kind of made-up projects that a university gives you right now. So I think if you build the whole ecosystem, I think Silicon Valley is the perfect place to do it. The one thing that I've discovered through Khan Academy is there's a lot of people who've kind of made it, who are like super smart, who are kind of orbiting the valley, just looking for someone to mentor, looking to kind of disrupt things a little bit. And so, you can imagine, instead of this school showing off about how many Nobel laureates they have on their faculty, they say, no, we have, we have the CEOs of this company. These are our market, and these entrepreneurs and these people who've done amazing things in the world. This is our faculty. These are the people you have access to as your mentors. I think you do something like that, I think it would be pretty hard to compete with.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so these are going to be the last 3 questions. Sal's already stayed a little bit extra, but there have been some great questions. So.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. So I have a question going back to scale. Ron has given us a 2-year deadline to grow very quickly.
Well, where do you live, by the way? Palo Alto. Oh, yeah. A very underserved community. Well, yeah. No, I think hopefully, I think we might be able to meet your goal, but yeah.
So my question is, have you thought about making the Khan Academy lectures more searchable, basically being able to reach them more easily from other sites or partnering with other sites, or even your students themselves? Have you had any experiences with them really growing your user base because they've shared their experience with someone else? And do you think that that's a viable way to grow more quickly than actually getting an entire educational institution to come on board and kind of buy into this?
Oh, yeah. Well, so just to be clear, and this is something we tell our team the whole time, this kind of rollout into schools kind of fell into our lap, and we're like, wow, this is an opportunity, and there's no obvious resistance, so let's do it. But our number one goal is actually that. It's actually the organic word of mouth, kids telling kids about it, teachers, direct to student, someone, one-off kid or parent trying to learn, even homeschoolers. That still is. We want Khan Academy to, if you have nothing else, you're still able to get an education. But to ask the questions about the searchability, that's something we're working on. I mean, it's actually, it's weird. I mean, 1,200, actually 2,200 videos. It's this huge curation problem. We're figuring out ways to kind of categorize it better, ways to make it more searchable. We're getting transcripts on them so that they can be text searchable. I mean, the Google people have told us that that's actually, it's unfortunate that if you do a text search for algebra right now, Khan Academy videos are not They don't even come up on the first page, like all sorts of random stuff, because there's no text that says parabola and all of this type of stuff. So we're going to work on that so it becomes a lot more meaningfully searchable. Yeah.
Thanks.
So in terms of making the Academy's content more palatable to the beast,
Yes.
is there any academic research going on in terms of the efficacy of the program? I mean,
Yeah. So we wanted, I mean, we're eager to do more like hardcore rigorous studies. Even the Los Altos, I mean, you know, I've been broadly impressed with the whole Los Altos school system, you know, from the teachers, the parents, all the way up to the superintendent. I mean, they're not like they're not people who like get enamored with an idea and say, let's just go district-wide with it for the hell of it. So they've actually done, so with the two 7th grade classes who have been using it, these were, they call it Algebra Readiness classes. And so these classes are actually, I guess you'd call them, they were the students not in the medium track. And so these students, they did kind of a before and after. And these kids went from, like, I forgot the exact numbers, but it was on the order, I'm not exaggerating, like 20% proficiency of algebra and pre-algebra concepts to, I think it's like 80% on average. So it was a dramatic change. And they actually never had these classes before, so they don't know what happened in previous years. But that was pretty powerful for them.
but even like instead of doing both 5th and both 7th grade classes, if you were to do, you know, 1 5th, 6th, and 7th grade class and not the other in the do cohort.
Exactly. So the
analysis
5th grade,
between
we're
the two.
doing that. So the 5th grade, they had a 5th grade assessment that they do every year. And so the one thing that, so the results came out, and our 5th grade classes, despite the fact that we weren't, and this actually, I was stressed about this, because the other classes were literally teaching to the test. And our classes, they were doing like this crazy stuff, right? They had nothing to do with the exam. And ours did at least or better than those. And so, you know, the good thing is we're definitely not damaging anything, and which is important. I mean, it's amazing how many times that question is not asked. So we're definitely not doing damage, and everyone's more engaged. So even on that metric alone, it seems like it makes sense to move forward. But the more powerful thing is, and everyone recognizes this, is that these kids were doing trigonometry and algebra, and that's not being measured on the 5th grade assessment. And so I'm actually going to administer an SAT to a control 5th grade class and to this 5th grade class. And I'm hoping to see one thing. Obviously, the 5th graders who've been doing algebra will do much better on the SAT. But I have a suspicion they'll do much better than than the average high school senior too. So I think we do stuff like that, and then we can do more rigorous stuff. These aren't rigorous studies. This is only me like administering an SAT. Like it's not. But these will be kind of the data points that tell us we can do a really rigorous study.
But one of the obstacles you're going to hit is that those people that have not got a master's degree so they can teach middle school math are going to be reluctant if you don't show them the money first. And the last comment before I turn it over. If you make the effort to map your particular modules to the Common Core standards, that would make it a lot easier.
We're doing that as we speak. We're like 80% done. I mean, we're 80% done mapping. We have to actually add a lot more modules. The videos are pretty comprehensive, but the modules we have to add a lot more. But we're doing that. But it's just like a spreadsheet right now. We're going to surface that so that you can navigate with the Common Core. But to answer the teacher question, I mean, this is the other thing. Teachers can use this to stay. I mean, that's the other thing, the side effect. The teachers are actually using this to learn and stay. And there have been studies that show that the best teachers are actually the ones that have, the best like 2nd grade math teachers are the ones who know calculus. Just because the kids know that they're kind of, there's more there. They know what's going on. So the teachers can use this to ramp up and kind of stay ahead of the curve.
Well, speaking 2nd grade teachers, I am one, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
I want to say thank you to LinkedIn for inviting me as well. I'm from Northern California. I teach at a charter school, and I actually have an employee here, son in my class. But I had a question more about taking it back to the actual implementation. Mm-hmm. Are the Los Altos schools, are they using a 1-to-1 ratio of computers in the classroom? I mean, are the kids at the computer during that math lecture the whole time?
So they have 1-to-1. Although what we found is you actually don't need 1-to-1 because so much of the time is spent doing other things that you could probably timeshare the computers. You could probably do a 3-to-1 ratio, and it would probably work out just as well, just because there's some time where you actually are working with your peers and you're not even using the computer. But that is a gating factor. At some point, you do have to have internet connectivity. Mm-hmm. And we're thinking about offline use cases for the developing world. But what we like to think is, even when I went to school in like the 80s and 90s in a fairly middle-of-the-road public school system in Louisiana, there were computers. They just went completely unused. Yeah. And I think the skepticism for deploying more money behind computers is justified. It's like, what are they doing right now with the computers? How is it actually helping anyone? And I think if you actually give a use case for the computers, and it's actually now that these people are, the teachers, the principals, the administrators, the parents are getting this real-time data, then I think the question becomes, how can we operate without these computers?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, there's a narrative here too where, at least I think you don't need textbooks anymore. And so that's a cost savings.
Yeah, and then implementing it then multiple grade levels. I mean, would you start, with the modules you were talking
Yeah.
about, I've started working through it myself as
Oh,
well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
refreshing, trying to get to the calculus level as a second grade teacher, I guess. But implementing it within 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, at what point, are those kids, because there's only so many modules, and if you're in
Yeah.
school 186 days a year, how are they going to keep going through all those modules for
Yeah,
6
we're already
years or
facing, some of
whatever?
these 5th graders are almost done with all of our modules that we have. So we're ramping up hiring fast so that we can stay ahead of them. And the funny answer is, it's funny that this is a if I had a 12-year-old or 13-year-old that did that, I would say, just take the SAT, take the GED, and go work or something.
That's
Like,
what I wondered,
go explore things for a couple of years, and if you want to go to college, that's a good problem. That's a
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
It's funny. It sounded like a crazy idea, but someone recommended it, is that we should start schools where it isn't like this is the tuition per month or this is the tuition per semester. It's just like, if your kid gets over 700 on the SAT, you pay us. Right now, if you go to a private school, $30,000 a year for 12 years is a lot, $360,000, right? And most of them are still not getting 700s on the SAT, right? And so you say, no, however long it takes. If it takes them a week, if it takes them 20 years. If your kid gets a 700, we'll educate them. If your kid gets a 700, pay us 100 grand. It was a joke. We were just kind of, but actually something like that actually would be good, because if the kid finishes faster, it's good for everyone. It's good for the kid, it's good for the school system, it's good for resource allocation, it's good. I know this is being taped, so don't take that idea seriously about this performance, but actually, well, anyway, but I think the simple answer is it's not a problem. It's an awesome problem. If that kid, actually the best thing to do with that kid is, the kid who's already maxed out everything, make him a TA.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the balance between language development, writing, reading,
Oh, yeah,
social
yeah, yeah,
studies,
yeah,
all
yeah.
that other stuff. And so you have
Yeah.
a 6th, 7th, 8th grader who has maxed out
Yes.
your modules in calculus, but they're not prepared yet, in my opinion, to go out
Yes.
to the work field in terms of their writing ability.
Oh, right. No,
their reading
absolutely.
ability, their comprehension.
So
all
this
that.
is, and so this is, there's two things here. One is, because these are 5th grade classes, the same teacher does teach all the subjects.
Correct.
So one, these teachers are actually, they're like frustrated with the other subjects now, because they feel like it's like Stone Ages now, because
Yeah.
they don't have this data analytics self-paced teaching. So hopefully we can expand and build some tools into the other subjects. The other thing is we've even thought maybe we should start one school ourselves. Maybe we'll do it right. We actually even thought about doing it someplace around here. So maybe you'd have an option other than. But it's not by grade level. It's just one room, classroom. In the same room you have kindergartners. In the same room you have 18-year-olds. And the stuff that you already have maxed out, you are a TA. And then the other stuff, you are being TA'd. And I think if you do a model like that, I think it's, and there's all sorts of interesting models about teaching each other, maturity, that you can only get in that type of a framework. That right now you're stuck with just your other 10-year-olds. And we've all seen it. If you have older kids around, you act more mature. And if you have younger kids around, you act more mature because you have responsibility now. I think if we explore that a little bit more, we'll have a way that we can really, once a kid is giving more into the system than they're taking out, pay them. They should be TAs.
Well, as a teacher, thank you. So.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So speaking of thanks, it's interesting juxtaposition. So at our last in-day, we do this once a month where employees have an opportunity to invest time and energy in the things they're most inspired by and excited by. And education is a recurring theme for us, reinventing education. And at the last in-day, we screened Waiting for Superman. Yeah. And I think a lot of people in the room today saw it. And it's hard not to walk away from the film feeling a bit of despair. Yeah. I think there is an understanding that things need to improve, but I also think, perhaps naively prior to seeing the film, a lot of folks believe that if you lived in this country and you wanted to be educated, you wanted to learn and do your best and be prepared for opportunity when it came, that you could. Yeah. And what that movie certainly shed a very, very dark light on was the fact that, that's not the case, that it's come down to a lottery. Yeah. And I think most folks here learn the economics of lotteries at a very young age. Right. And if we all believe that the future of our country to a large extent depends on the next generation and their ability to be educated, we don't want to be placing a bet on a lottery. We want to be placing a bet on people like you. So as depressing as some of those themes were, I think you represent the exact opposite. So you represent the fact that what could appear as completely intractable, unsolvable problems are absolutely solvable. And you, and I think you mentioned 8 or 9 folks, one of the key things we like to talk about here is how to scale and how to transform things. And you are living proof of what's possible when someone with incredible vision, intelligence, and energy channels that into something.
Looks.
And sure.
Since you're on a roll, I thought I would milk it for enough.
Channels that into something so extraordinarily important and valuable. And on behalf of all of us, Sal, thank you for everything you and your team are doing to reinvent education. And I know I speak for all of us when I say we're going to do everything within our power to help you.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
exciting. Thank you.